Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Colorwood for YouTube, back with another read along of the Dark Shadows Daybook UnBound, episode 1197. As the executioner readies his axe, can Angelique, Barnabas, and Quentin unite to destroy the ultimate curse of Colorwood? Question mark. Barnabas, Jonathan Frid. Angelique arrives at Quentin's execution with the head of Judah Zachary, identifying it as coming from the home of Charles Dawson. Desmond uses the distraction to shoot Gerard, and he is finally released from Judah's hold. When the head of the warlock dissolves into a skull, Angelique's story has new resonance. She is held for questioning, and Barnabas returns home to see his son Bramwell attempt to win Catherine back in the parallel time room. Barnabas determines to express his feelings to Angelique. When he approaches her to do so, Trask bursts in and fires a pistol at her. 1197 is rife with some of the most profound moments in the series. Some that are really there, some that play out in my mind's eye based on implications and wishes. In classic Dark Shadows tradition, it's also bang up entertainment. And it's the start of goodbye. I can't ignore that when I watch it. The idea makes my chest tighten, and the execution has a strange terminal excitement that exists in no other installment, its resolution without a price until the very, very final seconds. Before that, it begins with a sequence so satisfying that I want to take up smoking just so I can have a cigarette afterwards. Appropriate salute for a show of the era. It's still hard to imagine that this is the penultimate installment in the whole thing, but it is. Keep that in mind. 1841 Parallel Time is underrated. And it's also an epilogue existing outside the continuity we care about. We care about. Most viewers will be lost without thinking abstractly or approaching it first as the only Dark Shadows they know. But this, episode 1197, is the real beginning of the end. It's the series saying goodbye. It's how nearly 1,220 episodes of continuity depart without knowing it. And what was it like for viewers at that time? For the more aware, every day was Alpha and Omega, with no seasons and no full bundles dropping on Netflix at once. Each episode was the next, and the last, and the cliffhanger for more. And the final chance of or any of this might ever in any form be seen. Dark Shadows is a ruthless yet delicate show. For one with such a male heavy cast, it is often effort, but not here. Not now. There are too many feelings at stake for the show to be obsessed with preserving them under glass. It may be a saga that begins with Louis Edmonds passively aggressively sneering at Joan Bennett, but it ends with David Selby swaggering off the blindfold on an execution block. He's got a backbone like the Rock of Gibraltar, but a Victorian scientist to the end. It's never at the expense of his precision and dignity. Ending the show on a flashback gives us a sense of progress and a point of departure against which we can measure the very first episode. On no other show can we reflect on how far we've come and how far we've strayed all at once. The bravado of Desmond and Quentin, and even poor sad Gerard, make wonderful counterparts for Barnabas, especially true as the great man comments. Sorry, the great man commits to the most dangerous truth and choice of his life, true love. The pivot for him is the parallel time sequence. At this point, the parallel time sequences have become the Dark Shadows equivalents of lame musical guests on SNL. Time to hit the head, check text messages, and light some hookah coals. But in 1197, the interlude is a beautiful metaphor screened for Barnabas be a godlike Dan Curtis, by a god like Dan Curtis to spur him to take the chance he must. Seeing your own son and twin present, from the present and future at once is an escort mirror without equal. Then to watch him struggle to overcome the loss of the duplicate of the love you've denied yourself, because for one reason she's not adequately respectable, a woman denying you for someone even more respectable than yourself. That'll get to a guy for Barnabas. It's a Marley's Ghost moment. It's completely transformed for the first of several times in just a few minutes. My favorite moment of potential energy is just after he's off his shadow brother Quentin into his new and free future, alone in the foyer, having seen someone leave him and Collingwood smiling for once. Barnabas turns towards the drawing room, where he knows Angelique awaits him. And for just a fraction of a second, you know he catches a glimpse of his portrait. Is he imagining his first moments in the Collingwood of 1967? How can it not? The entire journey elusively flashes by an instant. It's a moment of everything bridged like the end of Koreana. It has a genuinely terrible ending, and I mean that in the best way. Lord Parker gives us a bit of a melodramatic twist to her depiction of having shot him. Everything realistic would have been, anything realistic would have been too much to watch. You need the cushion of art in a moment so incredibly cruel. In episode 411, Barnabas discovers the nature of Angelique's curse. He responds by executing her. And if that chain of moments forms the nadir of their relationship, 1197 is the summit. If we bookend his journey, if we look at the 1795 flashback at the start of his story, then 411 and 1197 bookend his journey. In both episodes, only Barnabas survives. Is it a ritual? To what end? What does death await? Why does death await Angelique at either end of this spectrum? Miserable survival of Barnabas. Of what possible benefit to this? Benefit is this, especially twice. None, because he's not supposed to benefit. We are the audience. We benefit by watching where his choices lead him. In both instances, Barnabas' central sin is dishonesty with himself. It's easy to understand why he's initially blind to his love in the year 1840. He's seen Angelique's torment, the inhabitants of three separate centuries. It's harder in 1795 because his denial is more complicated. Maybe it's a matter of social class and family pressure. Maybe it's timing. He certainly loves Josette, and she provides none of the cliffhangers poised by Angelique. Love, especially a fiction of even more, especially in pulp fiction, is is so tempting to quantify. A bit like a character stat in a video game, an achievement you unlock by revealing Judah. It's far more complicated, and its unclarity leads to the inevitable fan cry of the true believer. How could he love Angelique more than Josette, especially after all that she did? I don't think it's an issue. Yeah, I don't think it's an issue of more nor less. For one thing, Josette isn't here. Haven't been hasn't been by Barbara's eternal clock for about 175 years. So I mean, not really. Her ghost has given the permission to move on, and it's clear that Roxanne seemed like a good idea at the time. But yeah, swipe left. That leaves Angelique by default. How can you look past her misdeeds? The only salient fact is that he does. Yeah, he does. Yes, it's comfortable. Or what? Sorry, her past misdeeds. The only salient fact is that he does. Yes, it's uncomfortable, baffling, yet it's strangely horrible, wonderfully, inexplicably, infuriatingly, and unfair. Right? Well, that's what makes it love. This episode was broadcast January 26, 1971. Episode 1197, A Second Look. Guess what happens when the characters do all the right things and suddenly have the prospect of happiness welcoming them with open arms? Miranda Duvall, Laura Parker. Repeat our entire lives. Angelique interrupts the execution of Quentin and Desmond with the severed head of Judah Zachary. When its flesh dissolves with the death of Ivan Miller, even jaywalking tickets are just are just by sorry. Even jaywalking tickets are forgiven by the judge. Unable to live with this outbreak of rampart justice and happiness, Lamar Trash shoots Angela just before she can hear that Barnabas loves her. The end. Attention must be paid. So said the widowed woman at the grave for someone prized only for his insufficiency. I have come back to these episodes more times than any other this year. It feels irresponsible to devote more words to them, and yet it feels irresponsible not to. I show the size a show, sorry, the size of Dark Shadows is more than a television program. It's a companion. If you spent 3 hours on a hobby with a friend twice a month for 6 years, you develop an understandable bond. That sh- that stretch of time is how long it would take you to watch this story. It's a feast of a tale, many times in ways good and bad. It feels endless. The story accrues around the edges in more rush than the real lies. Punctuates. 1967 is always fresh. 1968 is always a rich and intriguing core sample. 1100 sorry 1969 is always better than we deserve. 1970 always pales by comparison, tra- trawling for us to apologize for it. 1971 is always too short. A reminder of what it's like to still love something when everyone else stops. I remain unshaken in my assertion that Dark Shadows is the most realistic show on television. It just kind of putters around threatening to do something significant and then just kind of, usually not, most of the bad news is bad. We get used to it. And then someone is shot and killed. I'm not being glib when I say that no, not every tragedy is a sudden and fatal gunshot wound. But I guarantee you that there is someone out there reading this who has lost someone uh, precious precisely that way. And that's how this episode ends. The most famous quote about television is that the medium is the message. Oh, sorry, the most famous quote about television is that the medium is the message. In other words, the means by which we consume art is as significant a statement as the art being exhibited. Dark Shadows is many things that it had no intention of being. Newsflash. This goes for all art. Like all art, however, it is a teacher above all else. Primarily, it teaches us to look at ourselves from a completely different point of view. But if you watch the entire show, the very storytelling itself is a most significant message, maybe more than one. The most immediate one is the words of, sorry, most significant one. So the most words of Fallcraft Sanitarium Director Dr. Harold W. Smith. Thou shalt not get away with it. The assassination of Angelique is a convenience. The actors want to move to a fresh storyline. The writers are probably hoping that new characters will give them new ideas. At the ritual of storytelling inevitably veers toward drape moralizing in this modern world dominated by an antediluvian ethos. We certainly hear a lot about forgiveness. And at the same time, we also live in a culture that absolutely revels in just desserts. Sorry, guys. We love forgiveness because it makes Oprah happy. It's what we are supposed to do because somehow it will liberate us. It will certainly liberate the people in our lives who are sick of hearing us complain about something. It's vaguely godlike. So I guess it's just that it's got that going for it. But is it just me, or does a little of the forgiveness we hear about seem to have its fingers crossed behind its back? Why? We just can't stand the idea of someone getting away with it, any of it. And because we can't make up our minds which of these things beat forgiveness or righteous punishment, we we will fetish more. We look to fiction to give us at the same time, you know, and who has to pay the tab. Angelique, so of course Trask has to plug her. The fathead arbitrary rules of the ritual that is fiction decree it to be so. There are plenty of Dark Shadows fans who love this to sweep in at this point with a list of all of the horrible things Angelique has done. And I guess this helps, but I hope you have a list of all the rotten things Barnabas has done, because he's just as deserving of the naughty step. And he pays an ongoing price too terrible for the show to make us watch, and culture smile on us for having it both ways. We applaud their 11th hour moral reversals, safe in the irony that they are being punished anyway. Extra, extra, Read all about it. The one thing these characters learn is that the past belongs in the past, and we all all we have to do all we have is the present. All we have are the decisions we are making right now. I spend 90% of my day apologizing for what I say, the other 10%. And when someone is really going to town on me, I gently remind them that it won't build a time staircase to allow me to make different decisions. In the past, the saddest part about episode 1197, is that the present is one thing these characters are denied. That's nothing to feel good about, that's nothing to applaud, and perhaps it's nothing to applaud in our art. Perhaps that's the message we should actually be taking away. When significance erupts in the mundanity of our everyday lives, it is shockingly sudden. There's no look taking it back. And then the show ends. There's no montage. There's not even a funeral at which Barnabas can insist that attention must be paid. If you're going to forgive, mean it, move on, do it in the name of the future that Angelique and Barnabas never got. It, it became a ritual to write about the final episode of Dark Shadows, and by that I mean Dark Shadows of the main storyline, not 1841 parallel time. A soap opera is one huge, sustained cliffhanger. And if you spend 450 hours hanging off of a cliff, it's important to study what happens when you finally go over, as I compare this version with other essays I've written about the end of the series. I'm struck by the fact that it's less sentimental than my earlier takes rather than more. 1000 episode 1198. As Barnabas embarks on a determined mission of cross-dimensional bloodlust, is he the victim of a larger trap? Barnabas Collins, Jonathan Fritz. Shot by Lamar Trask, Angelique dies in the arms of Barnabas, not hearing him proclaim his love. Savage in his response, Barnabas chases and stabs Trask, who finds himself trapped and dying in parallel time. Emotionally decimated, Barnabas returns to the present, and Julia and Stokes to find that they have successfully altered the timeline for the better. Meanwhile, Letitia, Faye, and Desmond catch a brief glimpse of parallel time where Julia Collins discovers Trask's body. 1198 is a dangerous episode. As the resolution of the primary series, it trolls fans as much as it fulfills their desires. There is no 11th hour return of Catherine Lee Scott. There is no tearful reunion with Josette. Instead, Barnabas discovers happiness in the arms of a one time enemy, as the program does what it can with what it has. It shocks more than satisfies. Seen now, it also divides viewers like few other decisions made over its run. Do we see Barnabas discovering his authentic love for Angelique, or merely convincing himself that the only game in town is what he always wanted? Is the series putting viewers in the same position? Are fans of the Barnabas Angelique romance responding to something illuminating in the text, or are they just making the best with what they have, convincing themselves it's what they wanted all along? Are you on Team Angelique or Team Josette? It might depend on when you saw it. For millions of viewers over several over, over several decades, the climactic twist of Barnabas's true romantic direction is something they saw only once, or never saw at all. Without VHS, DVD, or frequently cycled reruns, his real love is more of a rumor or fever dream than a fondly remembered highlight of the series. Until the mid 00s, there has no way to review. So, Highlight a series until the midnight. There was a moment not skewer any of the series for clues. Good thing because there were no clues. The writers were making them up as they went along. And if they had known that Barnabas's true love was Angelique, they would have telegraphed it years before. Of course, the show might have benefited from this, but the fact that they can't even hint at his unrealized love makes it more of a surprise. And it makes the whole argument irrelevant in 2021 because Dark Shadows exist as a complete entity. The details of authorship are just those details. This is the reality of Barnabas Collins because it's now part of a finished work. The answer to the Josette versus Angelique question may not be so clear cut as just choosing one over the other. I used to think of Angelique as the hero because of her last minute transformation and the tremendous sacrifices she makes all along the way. But upon this viewing, I was struck by the possibility I had never considered before. As a director, something I always tell actors is that the character at any point may not be telling the truth, even if the author makes it appear as if they might not be so. Sorry, author makes it appear as if they might not be. So, in terms of her grand transformation, what if Angelique is making it all up, or some of it up? After all, she has always been perfectly happy to use her powers to influence Barnabas's decisions. How he came about loving her was always less relevant than the fact that he simply did. No love spells on him. She simply mastered the fine art of the influence. First off, threatens to leave the family. That's in 1795. Then threats to him. That's in 1968. Then in 1987, maybe jealousy over Quentin. But in the end, none of those things worked, did they? Not like making yourself the hero against your past villainy, wiping out a larger threat, and then creating loyalty by curing your own curse. Has Barnabas been manipulated by the last or sorry, being cured your own cure curing your own curse, sorry. Has Barnabas been manipulated by a vast disinformation campaign? I say this because his decisions is ultimately swayed by, yes, the involvement of witchcraft years after her initial efforts. If it's effective to use your occult powers, simply impress everyone by removing them one way or the other, you're still exploiting the occult. On one or the other, you could never be in the position you are if it were not for witchcraft. Let's see. Clever and strangely zen. Take the implications to episodes that never happened. We have no evidence that she's given up her powers. It's not like there's a butterball pop up time where we could check if she can suddenly cure a near incurable curse. She can make her abilities appear and vanish at will. Faking her own death is the longest but strongest game ha- game possible. Had this 1971 parallel time storyline happened, it might very well have seen Barnabas exploring the timeline in pursuit of Angelique. At last, she could be desired and sought out on the level to rival Josette. At last, he would have had her right where she wants him. It's just an interpretation, just a what if. True believers, yes, a bleakly cynical one of the multi level manipulation. But you have met Angelique, right? Or maybe it's just preferable to the idea that she's gone. This episode was broadcast January 27th, 1971. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop for there. When I come back, I'm going to do the epilogues, A Last Sunset, Ben Cross. That's what I'm going to do next. I'll see you guys next time. That'll probably be my live stream, guys. So I'll see you guys then. See ya.